So, hello again. Welcome to our Brown Bag Lunch series. We are so thrilled that you're able to join. My name is Tanisha Lewis. I'm BAI's Senior Manager of Training and Capacity Building. Our mission here at BAI is to stop the HIV/AIDS epidemic in Black communities by engaging and mobilizing Black institutions and individuals to confront HIV. So, how are we doing this? We are working to continue this mission with activities like these brown bag lunches. And every month, we're bringing in people who can speak to HIV-related issues facing Black Americans. Today, I'm happy to introduce BAI's very own Biomedical Research Training and Education Program Manager, Myriam Johnstone. Miriam's going to share the latest HIV scientific information, which has come out of the recent HIV Research for Prevention conference. So Miriam is a stellar resource for information, and not just on HIV, but also COVID-19. You can even catch her every single week on BAI's Instagram and Facebook, and I'll put that information in the chat, but it's at Black AIDS. And she's doing a Wake Up Wednesday session where she's answering community questions about COVID-19, medical mistrust, and the latest vaccine research. So with that being said, we're going to turn over the session to Miriam. Please feel free to put your questions in the chat, and we'll have time to go through most of or all of them throughout this period. We're just asking, since we're in a little more informal meeting version, that we just have our microphones and our cameras turned off for the duration of this program. All right, Miriam, it's all yours.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Tanisha. I'm so excited to be here with everyone today. Again, my name is Myriam Johnstone, and today I'll be running us through what's coming up next in HIV prevention research. All right, so I will be summarizing some of the exciting new information that came out of the HIVR4P conference held earlier this month. The focus of this conference was HIV prevention research and the ways in which sharing our findings within the scientific community can push us forward faster. During this presentation, I want to highlight the HIV Prevention Toolkit, where the future of PrEP is headed, PrEP research during COVID-19, and finally cover clinical trial participation. I know that our audience today varies in what we may know about HIV prevention, so my hope is to translate this material into something that is easily digestible and that you can walk away from these next 20-30 minutes together feeling like you learned something new. All right, so let's get started. Preventing HIV has several factors, and each factor plays a major role in reducing the number of new HIV cases that we see each year. Studies have shown that latex condoms provide a highly resistant barrier against particles that are the size of HIV, making effective condom use a crucial part of prevention. HIV testing is so key. This is especially important because on average, the time between HIV infection and an actual diagnosis is 3 years. The HIV virus can sit dormant in your body for a long time before causing any alarming symptoms. Research shows that in some cases, that time can even be up to 10 years, at which point you may be continuing unprotected sex without knowing that you have HIV. As soon as you know you can start treatment, the sooner you start treatment, the more effective this treatment actually is, and you can start taking care of yourself as soon as you know. This leads me to my next point. In order to prevent HIV, people need access to healthcare clinics and providers that can give them all the tools they need that are in this toolkit. HIV is a fragile virus. Once it's exposed outside of the body, it loses its ability to infect within hours. However, that's not true in syringes. So in syringes, HIV particles can live up to 7 days at high temperatures, and this makes non-sterile syringe use that much riskier. Pre-exposure prophylaxis, which is also known as PrEP, and that's what we'll be focusing on today. There are actually 2 currently approved forms of PrEP in the US. So we have Truvada, which is for all people at risk of contracting HIV through sex or injection drug use. And we have Descovy, which is for people at risk of contracting HIV through sex, except for people assigned female at birth who are at risk of getting HIV through vaginal sex. So you heard that right. Descovy is for everyone except individuals assigned female at birth who are at risk of getting HIV from vaginal sex, and we'll talk about that later. Finally, post-exposure prophylaxis, also known as PEP, is a combination of medications that you take after possible HIV exposure. All right, so the future of PrEP development. So, although there are currently two forms of PrEP on the market, there is an enormous potential for PrEP to be better. Scientists are working on forms of PrEP that have multiple uses, like medications that keep you from getting pregnant and also protect you from HIV or lubricants that combine smooth gliding with HIV prevention meds. We're also looking for meds that stay in our system longer and offer a prolonged protection. The less meds we put into our bodies, the less damage that we tend to do to our organs. Future PrEP should be cost efficient. This would ensure that it's accessible for larger groups of people. We don't want meds that mess with our hormones, especially our sex drive. And finally, scientists are working to develop treatments that don't require you to have an excess of clinic visits. All right, so now we're going to dig into an overview of new treatment options for HIV prevention. We're going to talk about broadly neutralizing antibodies. We're going to talk about three long-acting antiretroviral drugs, abbreviated ARVs, ARV vaginal rings, and lubricants and douches. Okay, so broadly neutralizing antibodies for HIV prevention. So antibodies are these Y-shaped proteins that attach to foreign invaders in the body and shut them down before they start taking over cells and making a bunch of copies of themselves. So using these in HIV prevention is a new approach. In order to tackle the HIV virus with antibodies, we first need these antibodies to successfully attach to a virus, to an HIV virus, and block it from entering a healthy cell. This process is called neutralization. Since there are over 60 known strains of HIV in the world, we need these antibodies to not only block HIV strains, but block many types of HIV strains. Scientists call these broadly neutralizing antibodies. So just like that, now we know what broadly neutralizing antibodies are, and we can talk about them a little more. So one of the most exciting moments of this conference were the results of the AMP trial. This trial enrolled about 4,600 people on 4 different continents. It tested a unique broadly neutralizing antibody that was found in someone who was living with HIV for a long time. This antibody was mass produced and given to 4,000 individuals. The study showed that this single antibody was able to block about 30% of HIV strains that circled the communities that were being tested. This was such a big deal because if one antibody has the ability to block 30% of HIV strains, then maybe a handful of antibodies could block all strains from the HIV virus. All right, long-acting ARVs. So again, ARV is an acronym for antiretroviral drugs. These drugs are used in combination to attack the HIV virus at different steps in its growth and development. ARVs make up both forms of the current PrEP that we have approved in the US, so Truvada and Descovy, and are also used to treat HIV infections. Most ARVs need to be taken daily, or some of them even have to be taken twice a day. So you can see how there might be some user error or honestly just flat out forgetfulness with this type of medication. Scientists are now working on long-acting forms of ARVs, such as injections and oral pills that you don't have to take as often. These will function as PrEP and HIV treatment and will protect against rectal, vaginal, parenteral, and penile HIV challenges. All right, so let's review the 3 long-acting antiretroviral drugs that were presented at this conference. All right, cabotegravir PrEP is an injection you get every 8 weeks. Its population focus is ultimately going to be people at risk of contracting HIV, and scientists are currently conducting open-label trials during its final phases of development. Recent studies in transgender women and men who have sex with men showed that individuals who were taking injectable cabotegravir as PrEP were 66% less likely to get HIV than those taking daily oral PrEP. This drug is also being studied for future use in implants and patches, and additional trials are including adolescents, pregnant women, and women who are breastfeeding. All right, islatravir PrEP is a monthly oral pill. Scientists have currently conducted trials among cisgender women, adolescent girls, and researchers have planned trials for cisgender men and transgender women who have sex with men. The population-focused goal of this treatment is also to treat all people at risk of contracting HIV. They are currently beginning phase 3 trials this year. Lenacapavir PrEP is an oral pill that can be taken once every 6 months for HIV prevention. The population focus goal is for lenacapavir to be used by all at-risk individuals, but additional trials need to be conducted. This phase is currently in 2-3 of its development and is showing promising results. All right, so antiretroviral vaginal rings are small, flexible plastic rings that are inserted into the vagina and have to be replaced on a monthly basis. The rings provide direct protection to the vaginal tissue from HIV infection. This technology creates a more focused approach to ARVs in that a medication doesn't have to go through your entire body to be effective, but rather you can target a tissue that is at risk of infection. The Dapivarine Ring is a monthly vaginal ring developed for cisgender and transgender women. It has not only been placed on the World Health Organization pre-qualification list at the end of last year, but early this year it was included in the World Health Organization guidelines for HIV prevention and treatment. The Dapivarine Ring has shown to reduce HIV risk by 50% and is beginning the process of country-level approvals this year. Additional studies are being conducted in adolescents, pregnant, and breastfeeding women, and researchers are also running trials on the potential of developing 90-day rings that you don't have to replace for 3 months, and combining the Dapivarine ring with contraceptive drugs. So building off of the idea that HIV prevention treatments should have multiple uses, we are seeing lubes and douches for on-demand PrEP. Early clinical trials are exploring the potential of these products. On-demand simply means that these products are meant to be used just prior to intercourse and have the potential to effectively protect individuals from HIV. Scientists are exploring both rectal and vaginal use of these products, and the results of phase 1 trials are really promising. All right, so Dr. Fauci, Chief Medical Advisor to President Biden, recently stated that everything we do with every other pathogen spins off of things we've learned with HIV. HIV research and the years and years of labor and love that have gone into studying this virus have laid some solid groundwork for COVID-19 vaccine development and understanding. It comes as no surprise that COVID-19 greatly impacted HIV prevention response and therefore access to PrEP. However, during the HIVR4P conference, researchers were able to share their experiences working through a global pandemic and still finding ways to study PrEP and to make PrEP accessible within their communities. Okay, so I hope this information has been helpful and that this brief introduction to new HIV prevention technologies will help you feel informed when these products finally hit the market. As I mentioned, many of these are still undergoing testing and will require new trials to confirm their safety and ensure that they work. It is in these moments that your voice matters more than ever. Being a part of clinical trials and being a part of their development ensures inclusivity and that these treatments work for everybody. Recently, during this COVID pandemic, researchers at the University of Michigan gathered enough data to suggest that pulse oximeters, the little machines that check your oxygen levels at all hospitals, play a major role in deciding whether a hospital is going to admit you for care, were not as effective in Black individuals as they are in white folks. This suggests that a huge number of Black people were sent home under the assumption that they were not suffering from a lack of oxygen. And what happened to those individuals and how are they doing today? This also raised the question, were enough Black individuals included in the studies that led to the approval of this device? Descovy, which I mentioned earlier, is the most recently approved form of PrEP, and it caused large controversy when it excluded an entire population from its studies. Fortunately, they are working on fixing this and are conducting large trials that include people assigned female at birth, but this was a mistake that could have been avoided. If I'm a Peruvian immigrant and I'm trying to conduct research on the Mexican immigrant experience in Los Angeles, you best believe I'm going to consult a diverse group of Mexican Americans that live in LA, faith leaders within that community, activists within that community, etc. Because my goal is to create a wholesome understanding of not only the demographics in that community, but also the needs. And this is the basis for community advisory boards. A community advisory board is a group of individuals that accurately represents the diversity of a community that is being studied and provides assistance in research project development. And you don't have to be an expert to join a board. So my call to action this afternoon is that if you feel strongly about health equity, get involved. If you need assistance finding resources in your area, please email me directly. I'll drop my email in the chat, and I want to function as a resource for you. All right, so we have a few minutes for questions that you may have. I see there's a couple already in the chat, so I will answer them to the best of my ability. First question. All right, any talk of further Truvada discovery research among youth younger than 18? Lots of teens are sexually active with older people, mainly due to access to sex and dating apps, and there is currently not a lot of clinical data for the age group. Yes, so all of the trials that I listed, and I mentioned them when I was listing them, are exploring these medications and treatments in adolescents, and Truvada and Descovy are working on the same thing. So this issue and this lack of representation for treatment was identified, and the science field is actively working on creating trials to include adolescents. All right, another question was, can Miriam please speak more on 66% more effective than oral PrEP? Yes. So one of the things that they're seeing is causing the 66% difference is that it's just like birth control, right? So if you have to take a daily pill birth control, a lot of us forget, we skip a day, the weekend passed, we're like, oh crap, it's Monday, let me take two. So the same thing happens with PrEP. PrEP is a daily medication, and they're seeing that if this is an injectable, you kind of cut that user error out of the equation, right? So inevitably, it's more effective because of that. All right, a population that is often overlooked are trans-identified men. Are there any records of active research on how these pre-exposure interventions can work with trans-identified men? Yes. So these, all of the new trials that I listed, their goal before they get anywhere close to an approval is to make sure that these products are also functioning well for trans-identifying men. Are the vaginal rings anything like the Nuva rings for birth control? Absolutely. So they're really using the Nuva ring as kind of a model, right? So now that we have a ring that works for HIV prevention, scientists are trying to couple the two, right? So can we get a ring that has HIV prevention meds on it and also contraceptive meds on it? One of the big struggles that was explored during the conference is that they're trying to get the balance right, because as they've been doing trials for these combination rings, the softness of the ring has been increased, right? So let's say that the Nuva ring, which functions well, has a hardness of 50, right? When they add in the HIV prevention medication, they're seeing that the softness drops. And when that softness drops, that ring has a higher chance of popping out, right? So now they're developing this mechanism to make sure that the ring is a little harder so that it stays in place longer. All right. I had another question about the injection. Is there any side effects to getting all that medicine up front? And then also, does the medicine weaken towards the end of the month? That's a really great question. So the goal is to make sure this medication doesn't cause huge side effects, right? So in phase 1 and phase 2 of clinical trials, typically what researchers do is they study ranges, right? So how much meds can I give a person without them having a huge amount of side effects. So they finally got into an amount that doesn't cause an excess of side effects, right? Nothing crazy. Um, and they're making sure that they're taking blood samples from volunteers all the time throughout the month to make sure that the levels of protection don't drop below a dangerous line, right? And so what they're seeing right now is that cabotegravir can protect you for 4 weeks and maybe a little longer, right? So the reason they're saying it'll work, the reason they're saying it'll work for 8 weeks is because that level won't drop below the danger zone for 8 weeks. So that gives you, a little extra room in case you get it a week later or not, you're still protected. All right, as a PrEP navigator, I find it difficult to explain in simple language kidney and bone issues as a side effect. Any suggestions on how to explain to people kidney and bone side effects? I'm unfortunately not extremely familiar with explaining the bone side effects, but the way I would explain the kidney side effects and the way I would explain the kidney side effects, honestly, in any clinical setting that requires patients to take drugs, is that everything you take gets filtered through your kidney, right? So if I take a lot of any medication, I'm putting a lot of pressure on my kidneys. So inevitably, taking PrEP will put some pressure on your kidneys. That's the way I would explain it, but I can get back to you. I'll think of a better way. All right, is there a prediction on how accessible it will be to have access to these treatments, products like long-acting ARVs or the monthly pills? So the goal, and one of the things that was really highlighted during this conference, is that it's pointless to produce these products unless they're actually accessible to our communities and they're actually accessible on a global level. Because a lot of these products are being tested on the continent of Africa, right? So what's the point of us using this population to test these, getting them approved by the FDA, and then not actually providing this medication to that population that allowed us to figure out if this worked or not, right? So that's a priority. I can't speak on the specifics of how these upcoming injectables will be accessible, but I can look into that. Will these slides be available to us? Yes. I know Tanisha and I talked about emailing these slides after, so we can definitely send those over as a PDF. Will treatment only be PrEP users, or will this be for HIV positive people as well? That's a great question. So all of the ARVs that I talked about double up. So they're not only used for treatment, but they can also be used for prevention. And a lot of these meds are actually already used as prevention, but they're being innovated they're already used as treatment, but they're being innovated to be used as prevention as well. All right, well, thank you so much for your questions. I will hand it over back to Tanisha.
Thanks, Miriam. And thank you all for your great questions, for all of your feedback and your engagement. It's been great, especially since this is our very first Brown Bag Lunch or BBL for 2021. We really loved having you. And we really like this meeting format. We're trying to do something at least pretty casual for this first one, where we can kind of interact a little more with each other. In the webinar formats, you feel a little bit isolated. So we at least wanted to feel a little more intimate for this first one. And this pretty much does it for this week. So once again, my name is Tanisha Lewis. I'm she, her pronouns, and I'm the Senior Manager of Training and Capacity Building at the Black AIDS Institute. You can contact either me or Miriam for more information. Just visit our website at blackaids.org. Once again, this is a very first session for 2021. So please be sure to check in with us every fourth Thursday. We're going to be here at 11 a.m. Pacific time, which is 1 p.m. Central and 2 p.m. Eastern. Event information is going to be available on our social media accounts and on our website. You can stay updated by following BAI on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter at Black AIDS, and by subscribing to our website, which is again blackaids.org. I'm wishing you all a wonderful end to your week. Please stay safe and be well.